Hello, everyone. Happy Tuesday. Welcome, everybody, to this very special broadcast of the Breakthrough Show here on the Breakthrough Show Network. I'm your host, Jessica Dugas, a longtime homeschool mother of 6, a media producer, and most importantly today, a fellow member of this incredible homeschool community. Today, Tuesday, June 24th, 2025, marks a unique and important moment for homeschoolers across the state of Connecticut. At 2 p.m. Eastern Time, a quote working group meeting is set to take place at the Legislative Office Building in Hartford, Connecticut, initiated by Representative Patrick Biggins of House District 11. The slated topic of this meeting is the potential regulation of homeschooling in the upcoming legislative session. What makes today significant is not just the topic at hand, it's how this meeting has come about. While more than 4,000 homeschoolers gathered at the Capitol earlier this year to stand against any new legislation, this new meeting was organized with limited notice and limited public access, just as the other was. Many families feel that this closed-door approach undermines the powerful message our community already delivered, that parents, not the state, should decide what's best for their children's education. Because of this, the Breakthrough Show Network has partnered with local advocates, including the Connecticut Homeschool Network, CHN, National Home Education Legal Defense, NHELD, and homeschool mom Jenny, who's over at the Capitol now to bring you uncut and unedited live coverage of what's happening both inside and outside of the building today. I'll be broadcasting here in studio to provide context, commentary, and interviews. Meanwhile, our correspondent is live at the Capitol speaking with parents and advocates who are choosing to show up and speak up. You'll also hear remarks today from Attorney Deborah Stevenson of NHELD, Diane Connors, president of CHN, and other voices from our community who care deeply about preserving our freedom to homeschool. Whether you're watching from home or standing in Hartford today, this space is for you. We're here to amplify your voice, your concerns, and your hopes for the future. This is not about stirring conflict, although some might say so. This is about staying informed, remaining engaged, ensuring transparency, and ensuring that those who represent us do so with full knowledge of what matters to the families that they serve. If you have any questions or would like to share your voice today, you can reach me directly at jessica@thebreakthroughshow.com. And I want to encourage you to stand strong together today. So really excited that you're here with me today. As I mentioned, my name is Jessica. I have been a homeschooling mom since 2013. Actually grew up here in southeastern Connecticut, and I'm really excited to be back here in this state, continuing to homeschool my children and to be, I guess, sort of in the midst of all of this with all of you. I know so many of our homeschool families are watching today that weren't able to go up to the Capitol, or maybe you're watching from the lobby, and I'd love to welcome you here today. If you are over in the lobby at Hartford and you have something you'd like to share, go find Jenny and see if she can allow you to come on screen with us today and share what's going on from your perspective. So I want to say hello to Teresa, who's out in the audience. Anybody else that's joining us, please do share your comments down below as we go on. So listen, I want to share a couple things with you today as we're getting started and waiting to hear from those over at the Capitol who are joining us today. I want to start by sharing a couple of things from a broadcast that I did with Diane Connors not too long ago. In the first clip I want to talk to you about, it is where Diane discusses our Connecticut General Statute 10-184, which many of us in the homeschool community here believe that is a pristine statute. It basically talks about what the responsibilities are of parents here in the state of Connecticut Because some of what we hear from people is that there aren't any rules, there aren't enough eyes on the kids, etc. And so I want you to hear directly from Diane from that episode about what exactly Connecticut Statute 10-184 says. In this first segment, while we're here, I want to dive into some of the important things around the key legal framework. What does the law actually say about education and home education here in the state of Connecticut, Diane?
The law is very straightforward in Connecticut. It's Connecticut General Statute 10-184. And the title of it is Duties of Parents. All parents shall instruct their child and raise them in a lawful employment. It lists the subjects that are to be instructed. And if the parent does not do that, then they have to enroll them in public school. And if they don't do that and they want to use a private school, that's where 10-220 comes in, because they have to be able to show that there's equivalent instruction. So what does all this mean? The beginning portion of 10-184 is compulsory education. So every parent in Connecticut is actually mandated by law to instruct their own children. And if they don't, they have other options. But that first portion of the statute addresses the initial compulsory education. Everything after that is compulsory attendance.
So that was a clip from when we had Diane Connors on the Breakthrough Show recently to talk about what exactly the law states here in the state of Connecticut. Now, all of this being said, there's a couple of points that I want to make. One, we're waiting to hear from our friends over at the Legislative Office Building in Hartford, Connecticut. So hang tight. People are going to come in as they are able to, but I wanted to talk about some of these laws because there's this idea that there aren't any laws. And it was actually shocking to me as a homeschool parent. I had no idea that that very first line in Connecticut General Statute 10-184 says that it first and foremost, that it is our duty as parents to educate our children. Now, anything after that, should we choose not to educate our children, then we have those opportunities like public schooling, private schooling, tutors, things of that nature. And so that was surprising to me to learn. I actually did not know that that was the very first thing that said, and conveniently, it's often left out when legislators are talking about all of this that's going on. So I wanted to put that out there, that clip that was shared. I'm going to show one more clip that came from a press conference that we had back in early June to celebrate the lack of legislation this particular session for homeschooling. And this particular clip comes from that press conference and Representative Ann Dauphiné. So I'm going to play this for you now as we're waiting for our friends up at Hartford.
We are here today to celebrate your freedom to homeschool in Connecticut and to thank the legislators who supported your efforts before, during, and after the informational hearing that occurred just last month. And we're going to roll right into that, beginning with Representative Ann Dauphiné, Republican of Killington. Ann.
Thank you, Peter, and welcome everybody. I just want to tell you we're with you. We're standing for you and we'll continue to do so. So just know that. Today I stand before you to speak in support of something that lies at the heart of both parental rights and educational diversity: homeschool freedom. At its core, homeschool is about choice. It's the ability of parents to direct the education of their children in a way that best fits their learning styles, interests, views, values, and individual needs. Homeschool freedom doesn't mean rejecting traditional schools. It means recognizing that one size does not fit all. We live in a society that champions diversity in almost every area, so why should education be any exception? Some children thrive in structured classrooms. Others flourish in flexible, hands-on learning environments. Homeschooling can offer a personalized education that's hard to replicate in any conventional setting. It allows for advanced in areas of strength and extra support where needed. Let's not forget that some families choose homeschooling because of medical needs, special education concerns, or because their local schools may not be safe or adequately resourced. For them, homeschooling isn't a luxury, it's a lifeline and a way of life. Critics may say homeschooling lacks accountability, but homeschooling families are often among the most dedicated educators, investing enormous time, energy, resources to ensure their children are not just learning but thriving. What we need is not more red tape, but trust and respect for parents who know their children best. In a free society, educational freedom is essential. Homeschooling is not a threat to education, safety, or children's health, but a powerful complement to it. By supporting homeschool freedom, we support innovation, respect individual rights, and affirm that every child deserves an education and environment that works for them. Let's protect this freedom, not just for today's families, but for the future generations who deserve the same right to learn, grow, and succeed on their own terms. Thank you.
Welcome back to the Breakthrough Show Network. I'm Jessica Dugas here with you today live, waiting for coverage from Hartford, Connecticut. We have people standing by, and this is what I know so far. I know that originally there was supposed to be this meeting scheduled, and it was requested by several parties to, one, have this meeting in a room that could be live streamed for those parents and families and anyone interested who could not be at the Capitol or at the Legislative Office Building today. And they were denied that request. It is taking place in a different room where we are not able to live stream. It was on the calendar, which could be found at ct-n.com, that contains the schedule where you can watch a lot of what happens at the Capitol and the Legislative Office Building. And unfortunately, those requests were denied, as I said, and then going up there, the service is spotty. I'm hearing that things are wonky. The escalator stopped working, all kinds of stuff. So we're standing by to bring you whatever we can bring you. And after they do their introductions, we hope to hear from Jenny, who is up there at the Legislative Office Building, as I said, in Hartford. For those of you that are just joining, I would love for you to comment down below and let us know where you're joining from and any thoughts that you might have on this matter. As I shared, I have been a homeschool mom since 2013. I'm also the creator of the Breakthrough Show Network, and we really pride ourselves on the network on transparency first and foremost, and honesty. I don't cut videos. I do a lot live, and a lot of times I'm on location. I could not be on location today, so I'm here in studio and hoping that technology will work for us and in our favor, and hopefully we will hear from Jenny, Diane, and Deborah. I'm going to hang out with you guys at least for the next hour and a half or so. It's currently 2:03 p.m. Eastern Time here in southeastern Connecticut. And I look forward to, at minimum, hearing from the folks who were in the meeting after the meeting is over, at very minimum. But I'm going to stick it out here with you guys and just go along. I've got some other clips to share with you and stuff as well as we continue this broadcast. So I want to share with you next a clip mashup of when the time that Diane was on the Breakthrough Show and some of what she shared and we talked about regarding homeschooling. And I'll continue to keep you guys up to date. If we see Jenny come in the background, I'll be bringing her on immediately. But for now, let's check out this mashup of Diane Connors, president of CHN, when she was on the Breakthrough Show. I think we're taught, most of us, from a young age that, when you have a child, when the child reaches school age, you put them in school, end of story. So what I find the most interesting is the beginning of that statute 10-184, where the very beginning says it's the parent's duty to educate the child. And then if you don't want to do that, there are other options, like public school, private school, any of these other entities. So that's what I found most interesting about this, is thinking back to me growing up, and I didn't know anyone who was homeschooled growing up. So my thought was, that's what you do. When you have a child and they reach the age old enough, you put them in school, period. That's it. One of the things that I want to be sure to mention today is how often I've heard, well, if you're doing everything right, Jessica, and even in conversations with people that I know very well, well, you're one of the good ones, Jessica, but what about? And if you're doing everything right, what are you afraid of? Why can't you just go register or do the things that they want you to do, because you're doing them anyway? What is your response on that? And I know, like, as you said, CHN has a stance on that as well.
Yeah. So if you want to do those things, do them. If you want to file a notice of intent, file it. We've always said that. It is your choice as a parent. And that's what this is all about, is having the choice. Because if you have it taken away from you, then why? You only start to put limitations on people, and it's incrementalism. If you look at the patterns and what has happened, not only in other countries, but in other states here, it's almost never just one thing. It's incrementalism. Maybe the following year, it's a little bit more. Maybe 5 years later, it's a little bit more. Where does it end? So if you want to file a notice of intent and you want to do a portfolio review, go do it. Nobody's stopping you. But don't tell somebody else what they have to do. And, if you have nothing to hide, well, what if you do have something to hide? So let's talk about that. If you do, it still goes back to what I said earlier. We have a system in place. Nothing's perfect, but the homeschool community is filled with mandated reporters. And you don't have to be a mandated reporter to make a phone call.
And I want to just make a sort of blanket statement that any of the parents out there that are watching, that you do send your children to public school, there is no any judgment being sent out to you for doing what you need to do for your family. And just as we're standing up for homeschool freedoms, we're standing up for your freedom to choose to send your kids to school. But you should not have to send your children to school under those circumstances, under those kinds of numbers for abuse happening, whether it's student to teacher to student or student to student. Your child should not have to endure that, no matter the circumstance. And so that's why this conversation is so important, because if we don't come together on this matter, it's going to be one right, privilege, whatever, taken away after the next, because it's just going to snowball. Welcome back. I'm here in studio in Southeastern Connecticut. I'm Jessica Dugas, a homeschooling mom of 6 and also the creator of the Breakthrough Show Network. We're here with you for this special broadcast today. We're waiting to hear from our friends over at the Capitol. To keep you up to date so far, I want to take you down a list of the timeline that things happened. So there was an incident involving a fire in Waterbury, Connecticut, where a man who was allegedly held captive for 20 years escaped. This occurred on February 17th, 2025. There were rumors that the man had been removed from school to homeschool. That is not the case. The mother had been an employee of the local school system, removed him from school, said she was bringing him to another school system, and then simply never did. Following that case, May 5th, 2025, the Education and Children's Committees held an informational hearing at the Legislative Office Building, where speakers were limited as an effort to try to draft emergency legislation. Over 4,000 homeschoolers showed up and showed out at the Capitol building to protest any attempt to pass new legislation regarding homeschooling, at minimum without going through the proper bill to law process. Many have continued to stand against the overuse of implementer bills, dummy bills, and e-certifications. From that time on, Connecticut homeschool families took shifts at the state capitol and the Legislative Office Building to remind representatives, senators, and committee members that we do not want new homeschool legislation. On June 4th, 2025, we celebrated word that there would not be any legislation this session by attending a press conference at the north steps of the Connecticut Capitol building in Hartford. This press conference included Peter Wolfgang, Executive Director of the Family Institute of Connecticut, Representative Ann Dauphiné, Republican, Killingly, Representative Leslie Zupkis, Republican from Prospect, Representative Gail Mastrofrancesco, Republican from Woolcott and Southington, Representative Tammy Nuccio, Republican from Tolland, Representative Mark DiCaprio, Republican from Lebanon, who is also a homeschooling father and grandfather, Representative Craig Fishbein, Republican of Wallingford, Diane Connors, President of Connecticut Homeschool Network, Sheila Matthews, co-founder of Able Child Children's Rights and Advocacy Group, Matt Samuelson, homeschooling father from Glastonbury, speaking on behalf of Tim Knotts, president of Teach Connecticut. Teach stands for the Education Association of Christian Homeschoolers in Connecticut. Alicia Teitelbaum, homeschooling mother from Stamford, Democrat physical therapist. Deborah Stevenson, attorney and founder of the National Home Education Legal Defense, or NHELD, and hundreds of homeschoolers. The week of June 15th, an email began circulating from the office of Representative Patrick Biggins, District 11, East Hartford, Manchester, stating that a few people were being invited to a small closed-door working group to, quote, address important matters with the hopes of drafting legislation for next year's session. As the email circulated and folks learned that two of the people were invited were CHN President Diane Connors and NHELD Attorney Deborah Stevenson, the demand for transparency led to a notice to all Connecticut homeschoolers released on Thursday, June 19th, 2025, as follows. National Home Education Legal Defense's notice to all Connecticut homeschoolers. State Representative Patrick Biggins has notified us that a meeting of what is being called a working group will take place Tuesday, June 24th, 2025 at 2 p.m. at the Legislative Office Building in Hartford. I'm going to head over now. We've got Jenny in the conference room.
Be respectful. The goal is that in this, I know that this is a complex issue, and we can disagree on what the issue is or if there's an issue at all, but we don't have to be disagreeable, and we can have a conversation. And I think that the people that I've had conversation with in this room know that I am open to having a conversation, even though we're coming at it from different angles. And we may not get to a point where we agree on something, but we can get to a better understanding of where the other person's coming from and where each other are coming from, and how do we figure out if there's a problem, what the problem might be, and how do we address that problem. So that's the goal of the group. And so if we're respectful of each other while we're here and respectful of the process in order to get that job done, I think that's the only ground rules of this group. And when I say the process, I want to clarify that, because that doesn't make sense unless I clarify it. So I realized that after I read the agenda, so my bad on that. But today is to talk about what questions we might have and for who. And hope to get those in by next week, and then kind of organize them based on agency. And then after that, our follow-up meeting to this meeting will probably be to ask those questions of those state agencies. So what I'll do with the questions that you guys send to me is send those to the state agency, ask them to come in prepared to answer those questions, not exclusively those questions, but those questions and then any follow-up questions that might be along the lines of those questions. Because I feel like after May 5th, one of the things that I saw with Diane and Deborah had questions, but just like me and the other people that were there, we had two questions we had the ability to ask of the state agencies or you guys, but we didn't have, you guys didn't have the ability to ask any questions of the state agencies, which didn't seem like open communication to me. So I would like to make sure we have that open communication, we have the ability to ask those questions of those state agencies, ask them, well, whatever questions you guys have last time. And based on their answers to those questions, we might be able to identify a problem. And that's after we meet with, I'm assuming, the State Department of Ed, Department of Children and Families, and the Office of the Child Advocate. Those are the ones I'm assuming. There might be other state agencies that I have not accounted for yet. But based on the questions we have for those ones and maybe others, but I'm assuming we'll have them come in one at a time and ask our questions of them. And then we'll have another meeting to go over that after that. And then what we determine as the concerns that came out of those questions and come out of those, that process is what we'll try to see what we want to do. If we draft legislation or do something else along those lines, or come up with the problem we're trying to solve based on those questions. So that's really it. If anyone wants to throw out questions, I'll write some down right now. But if not, you just email me your questions. That's okay. You don't have to have questions prepared. But
Well, I just have two, I guess, kind of questions for what you said. So thank you. I appreciate your being open. I really do. So when the agencies, when you gather these and the agencies come, will it be just a forum like before? Will it be a public hearing? Like what will kind of that look like?
so the idea of this room was that this would be the room we would use, and that this, in theory, would be the space we would bring the state agency into. They're not going to make a presentation. They would come in and maybe answer the questions that we present to them. But the goal of this group is that it is a working group. We're able to get to know each other. We're able to ask questions of each other, disagree, and have that conversation. And I think that that's really the goal to be here, is like to engage in that work of like, we disagree on this topic, let's talk about it. Let's talk about why we disagree on it. Let's talk about how we get to a common understanding. So this is the space we're going to use. I don't think we're going to be able to have this many people in the room in the future in order to have those conversations. I think that the public part of this process is going to be in the spring if anything comes out of the work. And I think that would go to the public process of public hearings, the committee meetings.
So that was kind of my second question, was kind of, and you talked about the goal a little bit. So I guess my question would be, is the goal to come up with legislation or really just talk through thoughts, concerns, and maybe we don't come up with legislation?
I think that I don't want to influence the fact that we come up with legislation. I would like to say I want to create the space to ask the questions. If there are concerns that come out of those questions and we address those concerns, that would be the legislation. But I think first we ask the questions, we have the conversation, and then we see if there's concerns, then maybe we address those concerns, and that's where we get forward. Right. There might not be, but we want to.
Perfect, thank you.
So I guess I'll ask, just so that I have my notes good here. So as you mentioned, we're having a working group, but for the purpose of what? I mean, when you say ask questions, that doesn't help. Like, what are we really doing here? Are we looking to find something to address, or are we saying things are fine, or there's somewhere in between? But what's like the end goal here? Like, what are we? I mean, I appreciate that you're saying we just want to ask questions, but like that's a big ask. That's a lot of questions.
But you did
know what I
say
mean?
like the ladies at the end couldn't get questions answered. So is it just to bring the state agencies together to get clarity on, or I guess I'm a little confused on
This is my
So after the May 5th meeting, I felt like there was questions I still had. One of the concerns I had after the May 5th meeting was when the Office of the Child Advocate presented data that was, I've heard from people that they don't agree with the data, but the data that they presented was concerning to me. So they presented something along the lines of 7% of families that remove their children from public school to homeschooling have 4 or more DCF referrals. And I believe that that's the statistic that was presented to us. That to me is concerning. So again, I don't want to I'm remembering it.
Yeah,
You know how long.
Yeah, that was a while ago, a lot of
And a lot of stuff has happened since then.
Yeah, exactly.
But that's the information that was presented to us. So that's a concern in my brain that I want to ask the child advocate for more data on, more information about. And I know that the other concern was that people didn't have the ability to ask follow-up questions to that. So I don't want to necessarily say like that's the concern we're going to address. I want to say that we have the ability to ask questions, and if that's still a concern, then we can get to that point. But I don't want to influence what we move towards by my opinion. So if that's there.
And prior to May 5th, what was going on that created the May 5th? So I'm trying to get back to the very beginning to say, what, yeah, that's good. Why did May 5th happen? What brought May 5th?
So I don't know.
So I have some comment on that. Right. So I was with Representative Lee Burke, who she's the chair of education, and I'm the ranking member. And we were talking about education legislation, that how it would come out during session. And so she brought forth to me that we were going to have this homeschooling forum that I'm sure everybody in this room was there. We're not going to reiterate that, but that happened. And so I had asked in that meeting if the intent was to create legislation. And so I'm not sure about that. So then I heard that you were putting this together. So that's kind of where I was coming from, but that's kind of the steps that I initially was in on, and that's when I reached out to Anne, being on children's. So that's how that forum kind of came about, or how I found out that it was coming about. So
Something happened with
well,
this.
the Waterbury. So everybody's familiar with Waterbury. What happened? I represent Waterbury, part of Waterbury, not that specific location, but I do represent Waterbury. I was very involved with all of that. Had conversations about DCF, to your point, Representative Biggins' earlier point. So had many conversations with DCF about that.
And that was prior to talking to Lieber about.
That happened prior to, and there was, when I was ranking on Children's Committee a few years back, Senator McCrory was the chair of Children's Committee. There was a case, Matthew Tirado happened. So I lived that case through being ranking on Children's as Senator McCrory did. And the point was, and we all know that that was never going to be homeschooling, and we're not here to talk about that today, but that was the excuse to pull one of the children out. So I'm familiar with both of those. And
So it did stem back to those cases and those situations as to why part of that issue is the homeschool. And that's why.
Can I clarify something?
Yeah.
I think that's, again, this is my opinion, I'm not sure. I think that's people using homeschooling, that's not homeschooling. So I wanna, like, and I don't think anyone over, like, no one believes that that is homeschooling, but we think people are using, I believe, people are using the lack of regulation in our state to say, claim homeschooling, when that's not the case. And I just wanna make sure, is that?
You're saying that's true, or that's
No,
you're not saying?
I don't know 100%, but I don't, from the homeschooling families I know, from the homeschooling families that I've interacted with since the process began, I do not believe that that is an accurate representation of the homeschool community. Right. I think that is someone using our lack of regulations to say, well, I'm homeschooling and remove their child from school, and then there being no. That's a great question.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Because I'd like to have the facts straight here, okay? So everybody can understand. One thing, Representative, sorry. mentioned that you had been talking with DCF or involved with the DCF in the Waterbury case, and that you lived through the Toronto case. Were you aware, I'm sure you were aware, and neither of those cases involved a student who was homeschooled or prepared to homeschool?
Yes.
Okay, so we're talking about a situation where those two situations, those children were enrolled in the public school and prevented from going to attend that public school, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so my question is, why then did the subject of homeschooling come up at all?
My point, that's where I was headed.
There was no factual data that showed that they were ever pulled out or intended to be homeschooled. And it seems as though that this rumor got started, and from all accounts and everything I've looked at, there is no data that shows that either child was homeschooled. So we're still trying to figure out why they did. So that's back to you, I'm sorry. Still trying to figure out why they
And it's back to you again.
I don't have an answer on that. I don't have an answer on the origins of May 5th. I was a member on May 5th, and I participated. I asked my 2 questions. I got my 2 questions. They weren't great questions, but I asked them. But I think that I felt after that meeting that there was a conversation that was not complete, and that's where I felt like it was in an incomplete conversation. It doesn't feel like when the conversation's not done and people have questions and they don't have an opportunity to ask those questions, that seems not fair. I don't want that to be the ending of it. I would like fairness and people have the ability to get their questions answered. And
All right, well, I will say, forgive me, I will say then that there's no connection here, okay? There's a problem. There certainly is a problem, especially with these 2 cases. And honestly, I think what we need to do is clear the room and get DCF in here and talk to DCF about what they You don't need to do any of that kind of really. My point being is that, yeah, there is a problem. And we all, everybody in this room, homeschoolers or not, or legislators or not, we all feel for these 2 cases and what happened. And I have a whole lot more questions about for DCF than I have to any of the people in the room, including yourself. And I mean that in all respect. I would like to get to the bottom of the fact that our government did poorly on these children who were in DCF's care. Period. That's the bottom line. It has nothing to do with what all these people are here to tell us that it has nothing to do with. It really doesn't. If we want to talk about homeschooling on another day, in another meeting, fine. It has nothing to do with homeschool. It has to do with the state agency who is looking after the welfare of children who have been in their care for whatever reason, and it has nothing to do with any of us. They're in their care because unfortunate bad things happen in certain families and certain circumstances, and it has nothing to do with teachers and schools and crayons and nothing. It has to do with their living situation. It doesn't have to do with their school. It doesn't have to do. We need to get DCF at the table and say what happened and how can we don't want this to happen. And can the school help? You know, can the clergy help? Can their doctors help? They're all mandated reporters, not just school people, right? So we need to get DCF at the table first. And I in all due respect, I think we get, again, I love y'all, I don't have to be clear the room, get DCF in here. But get DCF in the room, and then you guys want to come in and ask questions, fine, but it doesn't even have to do with you guys asking questions, it has to do with us and putting our own government who are here for the welfare of children. You guys aren't children, the welfare of the children in here, and find out from them what happened.
Well, I would like to address that. I would like to know too. I have been trying to find out what happened for years. And Matthew Toronto, I filed a FOIA request for that information about what happened, what's going on. This was nothing about homeschooling, but a child died on their watch, and that was
and
horrendous.
also there's HIPAA things, right? So this isn't a public thing.
Yes, I
So
understand that, but
we have to understand this is very sensitive.
when it's a fatality, there are exceptions to the confidentiality rules, and that's in our statutes, okay? And they did not respond with one iota, DCF, okay? And it brings me to you, Representative Zupkis, because you indicated that you were talking with DCF about the Waterbury case, and I commend you for that and trying to get information. However, we've heard after May 5th, and at May 5th, that DCF says, well, we can't tell anybody anything. So, how, which I know is incorrect, because the statutes say you can share with different agencies, especially the legislature and the governor. They can do that. But this is what is being put out, and I really would like everyone to go on the actual facts and the law. And so I'm wondering, did DCF share that information with you without any statement like they've made today, in terms of we can't tell you?
So I talked to them. There were certain things they could not tell me because it was an active investigation, and I appreciate that. But the Waterbury delegation met with DCF, the commissioner, and told us at that point what they could tell us, right? Which was not everything. And the police, that was before the police report came out. And then they found the files on a fish drive, whatever that drive was. Well, it's a flash drive, and it's for flash drives. Microfiche, whatever. So that came out. I do not have every detail, and nor did they share every detail. I'm just saying that the Waterbury delegation wanted to have a meeting, obviously, with DCF to see what fell through, where, and all of those things. And so I agree with Representative Haynes that I think we should have a meeting with DCF and SDE because I have found out some things that they sometimes talk to each other and sometimes they don't, and why. I have been explained why they don't at times. So I think, again, I agree, everybody's great, but I think there's some stuff that needs to be done first before we even go down a homeschool road. They go down the homeschool road because the people that pulled their kids out said they were going to homeschool. We never knew. We always knew they were not.
Was Representative Leeper involved in that?
No, she was not.
And
it was Waterbury delegation.
Okay. So how did I'm confused because you mentioned Representative Leeper in terms of how the
that was
homeschooling
after.
Okay.
That was after, before the forum. So I was with her as a ranking member, and we do screenings. And so it was basically a screening, and was told that we're going to have this forum on homeschooling. And we all know after that, I'm not going to reiterate all of that thing, but we all know what happened after that.
It's just the context that is confusing.
Well, I mean, listen, we all know, just for perfect, this state has been wanting to regulate homeschooling for a very long time. Let's just put the facts out there, right? We all know that. That's nothing to be hidden from. And so any reason that something happens where somebody says homeschooling, it is a trigger, thank you, but a trigger to try to see what can be done, right? That's just a fact. So, but I do want to give you, thank you. I think that with, I think we should sit down and talk, because there's two separate things here. I don't think homeschooling is part of this. I think, like Irene said, we need to figure out as the legislature, why did one child die, and then why did Waterbury have it, right? And that has nothing to do with homeschooling. Not one has anything to do with the other.
So I think part of this is, I'm curious what training DCF gets around homeschooling and what the laws are. That's a question I have, because there's a lot of fear, I think, around DCF investigations, and some of it is founded because sometimes people are homeschooling and say not reporting to the school superintendent when that isn't currently the law, and then they get investigated by DCF, which no one wants to be under investigation if they're not doing anything wrong. If they're following the rules, the current rules. I I'm concerned about if DCF, regulation or not, if they don't have clear instructions, what is, what rules are, an individual DCF worker might have biases, might treat people differently based on things like race and class. And I'm concerned about that. So I think that it'd be interesting to know what DCF tells its workers, if anything, about homeschooling as it is right now, because I don't know if it's consistent across the board. So that's something that I would be curious.
And is homeschool an automatic DCF referral? I mean, it should not be.
No.
Wait.
But there are certain school systems that also are not educated.
Yes.
We need to educate superintendents and the staff at central offices to understand what the laws are around homeschooling, because that's one of the things that comes up. So if you don't do what they say they want you to do, they will make referrals.
Who is that?
Can we?
The districts, the superintendent's office usually will send letters saying, threatening, if you don't comply with what we're telling you to do, then we will. Right.
Okay,
Diane had it right.
I want to say that over the years, decades, I've talked to many families that will call, and we have a private conversation about the fact that they have been referred to DCF because they're homeschooling. These are families that they were not substantiated. There was nothing wrong, but this is important. To your point, I worked with a mom that the DCF worker commented on all the goddess figurines that were on her fireplace mantle. That is completely inappropriate. And other examples along that line. One of them had different Bibles on her coffee table, and the worker called that out. That should never come into the discussion. But it does, and I'm going to say something else, and I'm going to tell you, pardon me?
How many different types? Like there's,
There are so many.
I have one in my house.
Well,
It doesn't matter.
There's so many different
versions.
I don't know.
There's a couple more.
Yeah. Maybe her husband was a minister. I do not know.
Different types.
But these are the things that have happened, and I could go on for hours about these types of calls and the different situations.
But
should
that
not have
skews
happened.
the data. That skews the data. If a school district refuses to understand what the laws are and says, oh, because you won't file this form that you're not required to file by law, we're gonna refer you to DCF. Now you've got people in your data that were referred to DCF for absolutely positively no reason other than being harassed by the school district. And
Yeah,
I
and
take
Patrick,
these
I was
phone
gonna say
calls
that 7%
regularly.
that you're saying, we don't have to report that we homeschool, we're homeschooling. And that 7%, that's coming from people who have been reported and they're found out to be homeschooled. And then you have people who willingly file with their districts who say we're homeschooling. And so that 7% is way larger than what is in reality. Because there's a lot of us who don't report.
I can answer the question about the.
So 7, no, that 7% is larger than reality. Yeah.
Oh, you think it's less?
I think it's less because,
It
I mean,
is.
the law is you do not have to file that you are homeschooling. If you pull out, yes. If you start homeschooling from kindergarten and keep going, you do not have to file. There is a large population of homeschoolers who have never filed. So,
Because they never started.
because
in the
they
school
never
system
pull
at all.
out, you only have to file if you pull out of the school. So that 7% is probably a gross overestimation.
She had law.
Yes.
answers to.
There's the problem why there is, I agree with you, I've heard these stories for years. I have defended these people against these kind of false accusations. But the problem is really not just with the social workers, it goes up the chain. And the main problem is the lawyers in the department, both education and DCF. And I'll tell you why, this is really annoying to me because it's in black and white in the law. And on May 5th, the lawyers for those agencies sat there and they totally ignored the most important part of the law that says we have the duty to instruct our own children. Why did they do that? That is not just an accident for all of them to just start in the middle of the statute. So this is a real problem, has been a problem for decades. It's through in the legal departments of the Department of Education, DCF, and probably OCA. I don't know. That's a smaller agency. But This is what we have had to battle for years. And we have been coerced into filing these pieces of paper that are not required by law. And there's a statute about that too. It is called the coercion statute. That's a criminal statute. Okay, but yet these superintendents and principals do this all the time.
So I have a question. I don't know where it goes, but I'll ask it.
Ask the group. Say.
Who does the referrals of? Where do the referrals come from? Do they come from the school? Like, how does DCF find whoever they have a problem with? Like, where do they come from?
In most schools, the standard procedure is the school social worker makes the actual phone call to
DCF.
To DCF, or to fill out the 136 form, or the intake worker will do it. And I want to make 2 points about that. I mean, a little bit of a segue about this overall prejudice that we've experienced for decades, because I know, and this has been published in the Connecticut media as well in various articles, that if a homeschooler doesn't file a notice of intent, they have not broken a law, but they get reported anyway, and DCF's on it like that. But you have school teachers that call the hotline or the care line, and they say, oh, such and such is going on, you know, in a major city, and I know people that have experienced this, and the response is, well, what do you expect? It's insert the city. And they do not accept the call, but if a homeschooler does not file a notice of intent, I addressed this with Joette one time, and she did respond in writing, and she said that is correct. A homeschooler does not have to file a notice of intent. That is not a reason for initiating an investigation. But it happens, and I said to her, then you need to do something about the people in your field offices, because these workers are going in, they're following supervisors' orders, they're handed the information from their supervisors, and they're following through. And then you get some of them that go in there and they don't know the law, they don't even know the policies, and they're telling these families, you have to file it. Yes, and they're like, no, we don't. Yes, you do. And there are even, I for my own safety, I'm concerned to say what I'm going to say, but I'm saying it. I know of families, and this is documented on Facebook in multiple groups with attorneys in the group, parents in the group, of this is above and beyond homeschoolers, but it does not exclude them. It's happened in the community. People that have been referred, these are not people that have done anything wrong. And then DCF shows up in the middle of the night with the police, and do you have a warrant? No. Okay, there's no warrant. Well, go get a warrant. No, you let us in or you'll never see your kids again. That's been documented. So.
Yes, and in addition to that, I mean, DCF, I've dealt with them for years, and this does happen, but it's mainly the lawyers who are, they don't know the law, or they know the law and intentionally are doing it. I don't know, but they're giving this information down the chain, and no matter how many times I have been in the courtroom, I have been, defending these people, this has happened. And I'm sorry, but there are laws against filing a false complaint, 17A-101, for example, okay? And no one ever gets held accountable for that in these agencies. These agencies are I hate to use a term, but to us, it appears like they're running amok and doing what they feel like, because you put it in their face. And they go, oh, well, we have to talk with our education person or our advisor. And they come back and there's no change. And they still proceed to prosecute you. So that's a false complaint. I've had many of them go to court. And I've gotten them dismissed only after, a lot of, all the expense and the emotional trauma that they put these parents through by not following their own law. And I would say there were DCF reports that were made in Waterbury for 5 full years by the school system. That kid was in the school for 5 full years, and DCF and the police did nothing. They went to the house twice and believed the perpetrator. I was like, oh, everything's okay, and then they walked away. Okay, that to me is absolutely wrong. It's right on the agencies. It happened with Toronto in a 96-second hearing that they dismissed the case. And 2 weeks later, that child was dead. and 5 years, and this other child has to go 20 more years locked in a room because these agencies didn't do their jobs and didn't know the law, okay? This is the problem. This, the legislature needs to look at that rather than homeschool.
That's
the
what
effort
I
of
think that's
investigating themselves.
That's
So-
what Lisa said.
Casey, that's other, and then after Casey, I wanna respect everyone's time, so after Casey goes, I'm gonna ask one more question, just of the group about investigating the time group, and then, someone else to respect everyone's time, and make sure we get out of here by 3, so Casey, go ahead.
So I know people, so CRHE Bo came to speak at that meeting. I know people who are in the Coalition for Responsible Home Education who were education neglected because I'm in a lot of ex-evangelical circles. And so I understand where people are coming from in that group. So I was looking at their website to see what kind of information I could get. And they said that they found that homeschool oversight policies are rarely effective at identifying abuse that's taking place, much less in stopping it, which surprised me because they want regulations, but it's not, they're saying they found regulations, they found abuse in 47 states and the District of Columbia. It didn't matter if there were regulations or not. And I'm someone who's been trying to think really hard and talk to friends about what regulations might stop abuse and still protect the rights of homeschoolers and account for a lot of things. But if CRHE is saying there's nothing that's helping, I don't know. That kind of that surprised me, honestly. They said that their red flag was that people withdraw to homeschool under suspicious circumstances, but as we've said, people aren't necessarily even withdrawing, they just stop sending their kids. So I feel like we need to have some sort of thing where DCF, if a kid stops being truant and just isn't going, DCF has to be following up with those kids. Even if it's a withdrawal to homeschool with 4 or more verified cases, I feel like that's a conversation. Maybe if someone has 4 or more verified cases, maybe that's high enough that they could be followed up for the first few years. I don't know.
What people said, maybe that's one thing we need to do, is we need to look at truancy numbers versus withdrawal of children. And if there's correlations there versus withdrawal and homeschooling. And homeschooling, again, I keep saying, homeschooling is so separate. We're talking about disconnected youth, right? That's disconnected youth, truancy, all of those things. Those are the things we need to look at. Look at these guys, they're fine.
The State Department of Education said 87,397 children right now in the state are currently truant. Where are they and what is the agency doing about it?
That number actually peaked February of 2025. This is in one of the Connecticut News articles. That number peaked to 98,000. An all-time high.
Are there
I have
any
a
truant
child who's
parents here?
I was a truant.
My 13-year-old was truant this year.
As a student, I
She
went
had
through.
the flu and the COVID and then she got the flu again.
Yes,
Just so we're on the same
that's another
page.
thing,
You
yeah.
said what?
Truancy is when you get 18 or more absences in the school year. She got, I think she had 18, so.
Who's that?
Yeah.
My daughter's truant.
Isn't that
No,
Depends on the group as well. Depends on her.
there's a lot of other things.
Yeah.
So 98,000.
All right, so, just to be in respect of everyone's time, are there days of the week that are better for people? Are there days of the week that are no good for people? I would like to continue this conversation, but I don't wanna do it and then be like.
What is it?
So, what was the question?
You said you want to continue this conversation. I think we're gonna continue with the next step of after museum comes. Okay,
Yeah,
so
at DCF.
Well,
since it has nothing to do with us as homeschoolers.
Well, I think that the questions I have so far, if I was to read off the questions, one question was, do DCF cases stop when students are removed from schools for homeschooling? That was a question for DCF.
Yeah, so they continue, DCF continues until they feel like it's closed.
If they have
They
reasonable
don't have a
suspicion,
limit.
Right, we should ask DCF. I agree with you, that's my understanding of DCF, but I just would like to ask DCF the question. I think it's a fair question to be asked. We wanna have DCF come in first, which is fair too. I can read my own handwriting. What training does DCF receive around homeschooling? What does SDE do to train boards on homeschooling, boards of education? OCA to come in and talk about whatever data they had and where they got their data. how does DCF get referrals? I think that was about like homeschooling.
I think what you were asking though is,
Are how many of, if we're gonna move the conversation away towards the state agencies who maybe answer things and work, how many of the homeschoolers representatives are supposed to be continuing? Are we gonna continue future meetings, or is it gonna move?
Would you like answers to the questions?
Well, okay, I understand what you mean.
I mean, we have these
But our
questions. I would like
question
to.
is, like, could this just lead to just legislation for DCF?
It could.
And stay away from homeschool?
I don't want, like, again, I
That's
don't want to
what we're
influence where
trying
the
to
legislation goes. I just would like to, there was a conversation that got started that didn't get answered.
Well, I don't mind continuing the conversation if that is true.
I don't want to, yeah, it might only be for SE, it might only be for DCF, I don't want to say where the legislation's going to go. I think that's unfair to the people, everyone, so.
One thing I would say is there might be space for conversation because it was said that there is a push to regulate homeschooling, that well, there's always a push. So but falls back. But no, not that kind. But the conversation of getting people together to educate people, not like because you can hear and people are coming together and it's like, oh wait, there's not really a homeschool about this. To be able to educate different community groups, state agencies, to have that kind of thing, because I don't think the issues are about homeschooling. When you said, what are the questions? I'm like, I don't have questions about what we need for homeschooling, because that's not really a thing.
I wasn't saying like about homeschooling,
no, but
I'm saying like, these questions are for DCF.
No, from the beginning, in the beginning when you were like, on the agenda, I'm like, I don't even know I don't have questions about how to help homeschooling. But education for people about what is homeschooling and what does it look like in Connecticut? How is this working? What are the laws? How do they get applied? Those kinds of opportunities for conversation might be good so that you can start to build this coalition among representatives so that none of the state representatives have no idea what's happening in homeschooling. That they're like, oh no, this is a positive for our state.
I mean,
this is
they
a
could be
beautiful
two
thing.
concurrent running conversations.
Right, separate,
The
not the same.
homeschoolers could be on the north wing and the DCF can be on the south wing.
Yes.
I think that.
No.
Not at all. I think homeschoolers and all that you do and all that you're doing for not only your children but each other as homeschoolers, you all need to be better at what you do because that's what you want, right? And we want, I would think, to have our state agencies serving our public well.
Right.
And if there's loopholes and problems, we need to address. And I think that's where we can be effective. They're fine. They're doing fine.
I think
We need to address our agencies. And that's what we need to do. And that's it.
I just wanna quickly.
The farther you guys can stay away from us, the better.
Yes.
I just want to quickly remind everybody that unless somebody is denying their child being in the world as a homeschooler, which I don't know anybody. If anybody in this room knows somebody, then speak up. However, we are out on field trips, co-ops, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Many of us are mandated reporters. Our kids are among mandated reporters all the time. And it's not just the few in the public school. It's everywhere we go. There's somebody. Museums, libraries. You know, it reminds me of years ago, the myth of socialization. Oh, homeschoolers, oh, it's so nice, but they're not socialized. It was never true. It was never true. And now it's like, well, we have to have eyes on them. Why? It's a myth.
I think they have honestly, I think DCF and our state government has so many more children to work on. We should install and I do think that's where our job, in my opinion, is to hold our state agencies feet to the fire. Make sure that we are giving them the money that we're giving them to do the job that they're supposed to be doing. If they're not doing it, then we're gonna find out why. And then people are wrong. It's our state agency people. Again, if DCF in here, we'll let you know how it goes, and but that's what we gotta do. I mean, I'm not trying to cut anybody out of the conversation, but it's a conversation that they can teach us a whole lot more than DCF can. I'm saying.
I think that the conversation should continue. If the other people don't want to continue the conversation, that's fine. But I would like to continue the conversation.
As long as it's.
We need a bigger room. We need a bigger room, right?
Yeah, we need a clear understanding that homeschoolers are not the fall guy for any of these other situations. Because it really is disheartening having your child hear these things and be associated with these horrible cases. I think that needs to be clear that that's not the situation for us as homeschoolers.
Well, if I could say one thing based on what we've said here today, I think that one of the things that got brought up is that you don't need to say anything to the school in order to remove your child, right? I don't know if that's true.
No, you
have
have
to
to
withdraw
them.
them.
You have to withdraw them.
You have to withdraw them. I think what you misunderstood was
I was misunderstanding.
yes, we don't need to write a notice of intent unless.
Like for parents that just raise their kids and just enter homeschooling instead of kindergarten.
Can I explain
Yeah,
the law?
Yes.
Okay, the law is that, okay, when you have a child, it's just like if you were going to, you move into the state, you have a child, young child turns 5 or 6, you enroll them in a private school. That parent does not have to go and report to the public school or to the government that hey, I just put my kid in the private school, okay? It's the same for any other parent who's doing a different kind of education, in their education on their own. The people who are enrolled in the public school, in order to avoid truancy, the truancy statute must notify the public school that they are then withdrawing from that public school. Thank you very much, but I'm choosing a different thing. That would be true for the private person who puts a child in private school, and it's true for the person who
Indicate what you're going to do or no? You just like say, I'm pulling them out, I'm educating them out.
There are 3 statutes involved in it, okay? And they're already on the books. 10-249, 250, and 251 are relevant here, okay? 10-249.
This is what she does all day
It's on our website.
If my kids can repeat this stuff. 10-249 says that once a year, each local board of education is required to reach to the community and find where the children who are residing in the district, whatever age, where they're residing in the district is being educated. That's on the local board of education to do once a year in January, okay? If they reach out to the parents and say, where's your child being educated? 10-250 and 51 apply. And the parent then is required by law to say the name of the child, the age of the child, and where the child's being educated. That's been on the books for years, okay? It is irrelevant to, and there is a difference between the notice of intent and a letter of withdrawal, and that's where I think you're confused. The letter of withdrawal is what the parent informs the school, public school, when they're enrolled, that they're no longer going to be enrolled. And for 30 years, we have told them in that letter to say the name of the child, the age of the child, and where the child's being educated. That's what we have recommended, and that's what most parents do, okay? They're not required by law to do that until they're asked to, but we tell them ahead of time, so they know, okay? The difference is that notice of intent form is a form that was adopted in 1990. I was intimately involved there too on these issues, so I know it from personal experience. 1990, the state, they had the same conversation. Oh, we should write that. No, we shouldn't. No, we shouldn't. And the result of that was the State Department of Education came up with a policy that they adopted, not a law. The title of the policy was, and is, Suggested Procedure for Home Instruction. So the State Department, to end that conversation, said, okay, here's a suggestion. We suggest you file, but underneath the title, you see, they put language in there. You must file a notice of intent. There's no backing in law to that. And if you don't file a notice of intent, we can call you truant. That's not in the truancy statute either. So this is why a lot of 10, the truancy statute?
This last suggested language.
Oh, the suggested procedure for home instruction, it was a policy. It was issued as a C4 guidelines back in 1990, okay? The C4 circular letter went out that you can find, okay? And they put this up on the SDE website now, and say, well, this is what we want you to do. They definitely use language, I don't say Saskatchewan, but this is our guidance. And what that term means to public schools is, oh, it's guidance, we have to do it. Okay? So that's where the confusion comes in, that I have been battling, and homeschoolers have been battling for years.
They treat it like a law.
Yeah, it's
And
not
then
a law.
they threaten if you don't do it, they're gonna report you to DCF.
Thank you, I appreciate that.
And even when the local boards adopt it as their own policy, that policy doesn't apply either. It's not a law, it's not enforceable, and the parents are no longer in the jurisdiction of the public school in order to follow that policy. So I have been to every commissioner except for probably the past two and explained to this SD commissioner what has been happening. Why don't you just put it out there and clarify that to the public schools so we don't have this, we don't have, legal, I gotta go with DCF, the whole thing. And everyone I talked to is, and I have this info too in writing, the last one went to the lawyers in the department. And then they take the advice of the lawyers to say, oh no, you report them to DCF if they don't file it on its intent. That's why I'm saying, look at the legal department, because they are not doing their job and they are giving misinformation that has cost homeschoolers for years a whole lot of grief, and DCF wasted time and money by trying to figure out what's going on here. In the end, they do not have to talk. It's not law. And this law has been asked to adopt that as law and rejected it, and it reinforced parental rights through the years. So that's
Bipartisan.
Bipartisan, yes, okay? So this is why the homeschool community is very frustrated. When you try to connect us with the library situation or whatever, when the lawyers give the misinformation, no, that's not right. And DCF, these lawyers and the agencies need to be looked at and held accountable.
Can I make one, just not a question, but a real comment? Because you started the conversation introducing yourself and saying you don't think I don't.
It was a joke. Levity is fine.
Okay, I know. So, and I understand, you probably get a lot of flack as a freshman legislator, and but after May 5th, particularly, and years and years and years and years and years of dealing with this, the offense goes both ways. I'm sure there are people that judge your motives and say things about you, but what we feel like, after we've made it very clear, we've given you all the evidence, we've done everything, that for this meeting to be called, and at least I'm happy to hear you say that you're not sure at this point where the legislation is going, but the way that it was worded sounded very much like homeschooling and some kind of legislation is going to happen related to homeschooling. So that to us was insulting. Between Diane and I, we have 15 children? And we now have grandchildren, right? We have grandchildren, so we understand, when you have a toddler and you want them to put their shoes on, you never tell them to put their shoes on. You say, do you want the yellow shoes or do you want the red shoes, right? The Delphi technique. I'm sure you know that because of your counseling background. That's what we feel like is going on here. We're being insulted and being like, well, do you want this kind of legislation or that kind of legislation? We don't want anything.
We're needed.
Okay? Legislation probably needs to happen. There's big problems that need to be fixed, but not on our end.
Right.
And the legislation would be harmful, would do more harm.
Right.
Yes.
What
It would take resources away from the things that need to be fixed.
Yes.
That's horrible. We need more. You need resources are scarce. Let's do things that work.
I do have a question
What
for you,
this
homeschoolers, though. How's the civics education going?
I can answer.
And you gotta
I can
remember
answer
that this
that. You're going
process
against the
paints
process.
us as abusers. This whole process, the media, everything. I have people that I love and care about going, you homeschoolers, you hide your children, you're abusers. Like, that's what you're doing by dragging us through this.
Well, they say bad things about us too.
Right.
I also hate the fact that
it's a bipartisan issue and it's pinning two parties against one another. When homeschooling community is very diverse. 100%.
It's not about, this is not political. I'm sorry, but it's not. Shouldn't be.
No, it shouldn't be.
Children.
Shouldn't be.
Children, their education and welfare. And education and welfare are two different things, and we need to address the welfare first.
That's right.
why we're
Amen.
doing DCFA.
Amen, sister.
You should pull in some psychologists there too, I think. Oh, good, excellent. Like some, trauma, abuse and trauma people, because they know what the signs are. They know what it looks like. And if you're looking to stop trauma and abuse, you should look for the signs and the symptoms.
And will abusers follow regulations around it?
Right.
That's what, I was talking to my spouse and I was like, but here's the thing, because we were really trying to think about this and be open-minded, but I feel like if you're gonna abuse your kid, you're following them.
Right. Nobody would register their kids.
So how do we have
No world is illegal to lock a
when
kid
it's
up
something
in a
that
closet.
people are hiding?
Right.
People, they're disciplining kids, how do we do that? That's, and they're not gonna.
It's a societal issue.
Point them to a place where they're even if you make that.
And it happens while they're in school. Cheshire, we had a kid in Cheshire.
It is 3 o'clock, so I want to make sure I know you have your hand up. I just want to make sure we're aware of time. I don't want to use.
Would it be helpful for legislation for this policy that the superintendent's using and the Board of Ed's using? Would that be helpful if we created or did some legislation that it'd be very
You could remove it.
Remove the policy suggestion.
Because it only.
I don't think that we have that.
Doing.
But no, their policy, not policy. Their policy.
No, it's not. That's his policy.
No, that's what I mean. It's the State Department of Education, and we can tell them to honor the policy. Well, then why have we done that?
Yeah.
Solve the problem. Great job.
Welcome back to our broadcast. Jenny was just live at the Legislative Office Building in Hartford, Connecticut. I'm Jessica Dugas here, giving you the coverage from the Breakthrough Show Network in studio here in Southeastern Connecticut. We would love to have you chime in if you are a homeschooling family down in the comments. You don't have to let us know where you're from or any details, but let us know that you've been following along with this discussion regarding future possible legislation regarding homeschooling here in the state of Connecticut. So we are hoping to hear from Diane Connors of Connecticut Homeschool Network, Deborah Stevenson of the National Home Education Legal Defense, and of course, Jenny that is in the Legislative Office Building in Hartford, Connecticut. We are going to take a quick break and we'll be right back after this with more coverage of this breaking news story.
Breakthroughs are about more than you might think. They're about discovering who you are, digging deep, reaching to the core of your soul. They're about healing yourself, understanding your beliefs, creating a ripple effect. And it's not just those initial moments that matter. It's about using them to bring more joy into our own lives and the lives of others. It's about having fun, letting loose, enjoying every moment life has to offer. It's about finding a safe space. It's about creating connection. Join us each and every day for exclusive programming, special events, and a community to call home. where we invite you to explore, change the way you look at and live your life, and go beyond the breakthrough. So we ask you, are you ready? We'll see you online at thebreakthroughshow.com.
Welcome back to the Breakthrough Show Network. I'm your host, Jessica Dugas. I'm here with you today with live coverage from our studio in southeastern Connecticut, and we also have folks on the ground in Hartford, Connecticut at the Legislative Office Building. I want to go back to the timeline that I was sharing with you before as we are waiting for word from Jenny, one of our homeschool moms who is on the ground in Hartford, and we also will be hearing for some more folks as well. I see Jenny backstage now. We're going to bring her on the screen and see how they're doing after this meeting in Hartford. Jenny, welcome. Let me add you.
The crowd is all over, but we're gonna have a homeschool family speaker. Just give your name, and if you wanted to.
Hi, my name is Rebecca Farrington. I have 7 kids. I love homeschooling. I was homeschooled and loved it so much. I didn't want anything less for my kids. And my husband was also homeschooled, and he loved homeschooling so much. We're both super excited about doing it with all of our families. And we just don't think we need to be legislated. Everybody needs to leave us alone. We'll be happier that way.
Yes, we will.
I love it. I love it. Thanks so much for sharing. Thank you.
But there's a lot of people here. I don't know. Let me see if there's anybody who is willing to speak now. But it was a lively crowd. It was they were very welcoming to us. It was a good conversation. I know we captured it, so it turned out really good. So
yes, it seemed like there was a lot of people that were allowed in the room, and I know we weren't sure that was going to happen. So that was really encouraging to see.
That was really encouraging to see, and I think the consensus was that they really want to take a look at the outside agencies. I'm hoping it sticks to that. So, and I know a lot of people share the same sentiments. I think it was a good conversation, when we go back and we rewatch everything. So that's positive, and we just need to keep that going. We don't want any regulations, so you know that. So
Right. I know from our perspective, we heard a lot from people who are not in favor of any legislation other than the representatives that were in there that may be curious about possible legislation. Were there any homeschoolers in the room who were for legislation?
It didn't seem like it off the cuff. I think a lot of the conversation was more regulations don't really work. So there was one conversation where they said, hey, we did research on it and the legislation doesn't really work. And when you rewatch the whole entire meeting, we'll see that. But I think it was a positive meeting, but we just need to be, on standby and alert as we always are. And hopefully it doesn't show up again. But I think it was good to have the conversations, and the dialogue was very open, which is good. So it was a really friendly atmosphere, and everybody talked together. And I think that's what we really need to promote going forward. I don't think there's a huge understanding about homeschool and what really happens with it. So I think the knowledge of it being spread around is really helpful in these meetings. Actually, this meeting was, I think, productive. So
even just reading some of the faces of some of the folks in the room, when Deborah Stevenson from NHELD was talking about what the law actually says here, it felt like so many people in the room weren't even aware that we have good laws here. It's just a matter of implementing what we already have.
Right. And some of the laws we do have makes it more confusing, and it's just really diluting what really needs to happen. So it sounds like possibly removing a couple things too. So I hope the conversation will continue. So if we can make government smaller, we always know that's a good thing. So.
Right. Absolutely. Well, I know that we are hoping to hear from Diane Connors from CHN, as well as Deborah Stevenson from NHELD. So if you'd like to, we can fill some space here, have some conversations, and then you can come back on when they're available.
Sure.
Or any of the families. Thanks so much, Jenny. I appreciate you.
Appreciate you.
All right, you guys. So you heard it from Jenny. The energy in the room was fantastic from our homeschoolers here in the state of Connecticut. And it is so nice to hear that they were welcomed into the room. We weren't sure if that was going to happen. We had understood from the beginning that this was going to be a closed door meeting. And so them allowing the homeschoolers into the room that were there, at least some, we saw some signs. We saw some smiling faces. There was no knockdown dragouts that we saw on screen there. But I think that Jenny is correct that there's a lot of education that needs to be done. We heard some of that in the meeting with our legislators, with the school boards, with the DCF regarding what the law actually is regarding homeschooling here in the state of Connecticut. I want to head over to the comments and say hello to a couple people who are joining us today. Teresa is here. Brittany is here. We have Jennifer visiting us in the comments. We have, let's see, Elizabeth joining us. Also, I agree, our representation is awesome. And another commenter saying, I can't believe they're doing this again. It's like, how much more plain can we speak? And it's true. I think there's this consensus that we had over 4,000 people come up to the Capitol building in Hartford in May, and that should speak volumes to our representatives who were elected to speak on our behalf. And so it's important that that is heard and listened to. I've got Jenny coming back in the studio now. We're going to add her to the screen. Let's hear from her. Jenny, welcome back.
Hey, we're back. So we have somebody else to speak to. So introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Donna Person. I am Vice President of TEACH, which stands for the Education Association of Christian Homeschoolers in Connecticut. So I would have to say, in a nutshell, I am more encouraged coming out of the meeting than I was going in. Because it sounds like a lot of it just got laid on the table.
Yeah.
This is being put maybe where it belongs. So
Yeah.
that direction, I'm encouraged.
Yeah, it felt like that was a good that a lot of people were becoming educated about the laws that we have in this state. I was telling Jenny that it seemed like many people weren't even aware of the laws that we already have in place here in Connecticut. So I think we're doing a good job in educating, and we thank you for your representation at this meeting.
Thanks.
Okay, we're good.
All right, thank you, Jenny. How's everything? Is everybody buzzing? Is the energy good?
I think the energy is good. I think a lot of people are, ready to get out of here into the heat wave, and I think it was positive. So, we flipped it. I think. Yeah. Do you want to here?
Who am I talking?
Hi, I'm Jessica from the Breakthrough Show Network. Thank you so much for joining us today. What do you have to share about this meeting that happened today?
I think we were successful in turning the spotlight where it deserves to be turned, and that's on the issues with DCF. They want to use data against us that doesn't make sense. We've suffered, the homeschool community has suffered forever being falsely reported simply because school districts don't understand the policies, and that skews data, and it's being weaponized against us. And I think we opened some eyes to that. I think we shed the so hopefully they'll stop looking at us and look at where they need to be looking.
I agree. Thank you for sharing that. I think during the meeting you had shared about how some of the homeschool families being reported for simply for homeschooling is what's skewing the numbers. So I appreciate you sharing about that, because I know that we really need to take a good look at these statistics that were released that are not accurate.
Absolutely. We need to get that policy out, really. Wouldn't it be great if that were the outcome of this mess?
It would be amazing. It would be amazing. Thank you so much for sharing your experience today. I appreciate you being here.
All right, let me see if we can pop in, and
those three ladies down there would like to.
Okay, we're gonna walk down. This is kind of very lively. There's still a lot of we're very pumped. Like you heard there. We think we turned it a little bit, and we got some lovely ladies here. They're fired up. they feel at home at the people's house now. They're ready to bring a couch and a TV and a water cooler. You know, they're set up home here because we've been here a little bit too much. But I think
Be ready to burn our signs.
All right. So what do you ladies have to say about?
Oh, I see friends. I see friends here today. How are you, ladies?
Hey, Jessica.
Good to hear from you from the studio. What's your overall feeling? Were you guys? I know I saw Taliba in there. Any of you other guys were in the meeting, and what was your feeling about it?
Well, I think that some really good points were made. The point is, why are we here when a state agency dropped the ball numerous times, and why aren't they meeting with DCF? And I'm very grateful that Rep. Hayes and Rep. Supkis and Representative Dauphiné, that they were here to ask these important questions. And Representative Supkis, she said the truth is that they've been looking to regulate home education for years now. And it's like, yes, because they're just using these instances of tragedy as their vehicle.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah. Right.
And if they think that if these majority legislators in this state think that they're more invested in our children than we are, they're mistaken.
I would agree. I appreciate you sharing that. Anybody, what's the overall energy of what you feel? I know that we weren't sure if anybody was going to be allowed in the room. And so I think there's a general consensus that we're glad that the door was opened a little bit, but how are you feeling about afterwards? Do you feel like there may be more meetings going forward? What's your thoughts about that?
Representative Biggins, he wants to continue meeting. And I don't understand why he needs to meet with us, but Representative Hayes said, yes, we will meet to bring DCF here, right? They chose a small conference room instead of a regular hearing room. So we were standing up, sitting on the floor, and hanging out outside, trying to hear. These other moms are trying to hear outside. So it's interesting, with all these rooms available, they chose this small conference room.
Any of them, all of them. It's just.
But,
yeah. Should I put pressure on this?
Let us know how. So I know that we finished up for today. Was there any word on when a next meeting might be? Did they say that, or are we waiting?
Rep. Hayes, is it Haynes or Hayes? Hayes is pushing for DCF involvement before any further stuff for us, but unfortunately I don't get that sense from Biggins. And so I think, we're kind of all just going to be mindfully watching to see what, if they're going to try to pull tricks. I think that's the fear that still lives there. Yes. But I was happy to be in that room because it was a more positive feeling than I thought I was going to have when I got here, right? Like I did not expect to hear the people who were saying, this is not a homeschool issue. I was really feeling like everybody was kind of ganging up and they were all just kind of targeting that. In that room, I didn't feel that sense. I did feel like they were really interested in bringing it back to DCF. So I do hope that actually happens and it does take us off of the table. I just don't know the agenda that may be somewhere else that may not happen. So I'm still just kind of watching, but I am a little bit more hopeful, I think, after that conversation today that maybe homeschool families will not be involved in the future, but we'll be ready if they, if they keep calling us to the carpet, we're gonna keep showing up.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. And Attorney Stevenson and Diane Connors from CHN, they made it very clear what our Connecticut Constitution, our state statutes says, what is the law, that we have our duty to educate our children so that Representative Biggins understands. And then DCF needs to understand that we follow these statutes and they need to, be educated on Connecticut statutes.
Yes, I feel like it was a very educational, it was educational all around what happened in that room today. I could tell by the looks on some people's faces that this was the first time they were hearing that we have laws in place, that they just need to be, followed. And that would be a good first step. Before you ladies go today, you want to show me what your signs say? What did you bring into the room today or into the office building?
Well, you need like a whole hour episode for that one. No,
and it's like, every time they would say,
oh, we love this one. Okay.
Right. Yep. I'm like, wait, this is what we have an answer for that as well.
Hashtag we have a sign.
Right? And I truly understand how much this is affecting us as families. It's not right. Talking to him, I think, people had plans, and now that the treatment matters, they have no room to stand on any of this nonsense that they've been putting forward on us. And so these are my little signs.
Those are the signs.
And Family Institute of Connecticut, they always have stickers, which is great. So
hands off homeschoolers.
Yes.
Yep. ConnecticutFamily.org.
There you go.
So I think people are wrapping up. We're gonna walk into the heat wave and get out of here, and we'll see when we're back. Like I said, we're a little bit too much at home here, but we're gonna keep showing up. So
all right, sounds good. Thank you so much again, Jenny, and let us know. We're going to be here for a few more minutes if Diane and Deb want to make any statements, and after that we're going to close it out. But thank you so much again, Jenny, for all your hard work today on the floor from Hartford in the Legislative Office Building. Thanks so much again. All right, you guys. So that was from some of the parents there on the Capitol building or the Legislative Office Building floor here in Hartford, Connecticut, as we continue this discussion about possible future legislation regarding homeschooling. We're going to give them a few more minutes in case anybody else would like to make any statements today. I want to take you through really quickly that timeline of events again, as I was sharing before. So there was an incident involving a fire in Waterbury, Connecticut, where a man who was allegedly held captive for 20 years escaped, and that occurred on February 17th, 2025. Fast forward to May 5th, the Education and Children's Committees held an informational meeting in the Legislative Office Building where speakers were limited as an effort to try to draft emergency legislation. Over 4,000 homeschoolers showed up at the Capitol building to protest any attempt to pass new legislation regarding homeschooling, at minimum without going through the proper bill to law process. Since that time, many have continued to stand against the overuse of implementer bills, dummy bills, and e-certification. From that time on, Connecticut homeschool families took shifts at the state capitol and Legislative Office Building to remind representatives, senators, and committee members that we do not want new homeschool legislation. On June 5th, 2025, we celebrated word that there would not be any legislation this session by attending a press conference at the north steps of the Connecticut Capitol building. This press conference included homeschool representatives, homeschooling families, and supportive Connecticut House representatives who were there to speak on behalf of homeschoolers. The week of June 15th, an email began circulating from the office of Representative Patrick Biggins from District 11, East Hartford and Manchester, stating that a few people were being invited to a small closed-door working group to, quote, address important matters with the hopes of drafting legislation for next year's session. As the email circulated and folks learned that two of the people who were invited were CHN President Diane Connors and NHELD Attorney Deborah Stevenson, the demand for transparency led to a notice to all homeschoolers that was released on Thursday, June 19th, 2025, encouraging everyone to make plans to attend at the legislative office building in Hartford, Connecticut. And that is the group that you were able to witness here today from the inside of that legislative office building. I think overall, the general consensus is that it was a positive meeting. The energy was positive, and it was certainly such that there were other people allowed to come into this meeting room other than the original closed door plan that was scheduled to take place. I will note that it was requested that the meeting be moved to a larger room where it could be live streamed from the internal video system there in the Capitol and Legislative Office Building, but that request was denied. In fact, the meeting itself was removed from the schedule, which can be found at ct-n.com/daily_schedule. So it was removed from that. It was denied to be taken to a larger room. It was denied to be live streamed to everyone. And that is why we at the Breakthrough Show Network came on board to partner with CHN and NHELD and bring you this coverage today. I appreciate you all being here today. I know that sometimes when we're doing this kind of thing, the sound isn't always the greatest, but I think we got the gist that there was a lot of education and necessary education taking place in that meeting room today, where people were informed of what the laws actually say regarding homeschooling here in the state of Connecticut, and that the legislators' focus is on the wrong group of people. So all of that being said, I want to thank you all again for being here today. You can find more information about everything we've been talking about today by following the Connecticut Homeschool Network on their website, which is, let me pull that up for you here. It is cthomeschoolnetwork.org. cthomeschoolnetwork.org. You can also follow NHELD, which is National Home Education Legal Defense, at nheld.us. And we will continue to bring as much unedited and undoctored coverage from here in Southeastern Connecticut from the Breakthrough Show Network. I'm Jessica Dugas. I want to thank everybody that was involved today. Jenny from On the Floor in the Legislative Office Building in Hartford, all of the families who spoke today on our broadcast. Of course, Diane Connors, President of the Connecticut Homeschool Network, Deborah Stevenson, Attorney Deborah Stevenson from National Home Education Legal Defense. I'm Jessica Dugas, creator and host here at the Breakthrough Show Network, and we thank you so much for being here today, and we'll be back for more again another time. We thank you, and we'll see you next time. Appreciate you.